Usually, when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this very strict expectation of precision, right? It kind of feels like engineering.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's very mechanical.
Right, like you break your arm, the x-ray shows this jagged white line on a black background, and the doctor just points at it and says, well, there it is. It's visible. It's measurable.
And that gives us a really profound sense of comfort. I mean,
Hmm.
human beings are deeply uncomfortable with ambiguity, especially when it comes to uh, our physical survival. We want our problems to be categorized, labeled, and, handed back to us with a neat, linear solution.
Exactly. But then you step into the world of modern systemic illness, you step into the terrifying realm of antibiotic resistance, and suddenly that metaphorical x-ray machine is completely broken.
Yeah, totally useless.
We are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is just entirely murky, right? It's microscopic and it's constantly mutating. And to navigate this today, we're going to start with this vivid, kind of seemingly paradoxical image.
A wild image, yeah.
It really is. So I want you, listening right now, to picture an ancient Vedic priest. Imagine someone from a scholarly lineage that stretches back, over 600 years.
Right.
Now picture that same priest standing right next to a modern, glowing, artificial intelligence healthcare kiosk. And here is the kicker, right? They are both fighting the exact same invisible enemy.
It's such a brilliant juxtaposition because it perfectly frames this massive, incredibly dense collection of source materials we're unpacking for this deep dive.
Oh yeah, dense is the word.
Right. I mean, we are looking at a stack of documents that somehow manages to weave together ancient Hindu philosophy, the psychological frameworks of Carl Jung.
Which we'll get into.
Yes. And whistleblower employment tribunal records from modern healthcare systems, plus the highly technical architectural blueprints of an artificial intelligence ecosystem known as Dr. Maya.
So let's lay out the mission for today. Our goal for this deep dive is to map out exactly how a modern pediatrician, Dr. Kadiyali Srivatsa, is actively using his direct ancestral link to ancient Indian sages to combat the modern superbug crisis.
Yeah, the antimicrobial resistance crisis.
Right. We are going to explore this really massive collision of cosmic law, institutional karma, and what the source materials describe as the inevitable collapse of modern medical monopolies.
But, before we take a single step forward, it is absolutely vital to establish the parameters of this discussion.
Good point. Yeah, we need to be clear.
Because the sources we're examining contain some incredibly strong, even blistering critiques of modern institutions. They heavily critique the historical legacy of the British Empire, the foundational structures of state health systems like the National Health Service in the UK, and just the broader centralized paradigms of Western medicine itself.
Yeah, they really pull no punches. And to be crystal clear to you listening, we are not taking sides here. We are not endorsing these viewpoints, and we aren't condemning these institutions either.
Right. Our job today is to impartially unpack the fascinating philosophical, historical, and technological arguments presented in these specific texts.
Exactly. We're basically treating this material like a complex architectural blueprint. We want to understand how the argument is built, not to pass judgment on whether it should have been built in the first place.
Yeah. And to understand the physical, biological crisis of superbugs that these texts are warning us about, we actually can't start with biology. We have to start with metaphysics.
Which is such a pivot, right?
It really is. The sources establish this psychological and spiritual lens through which they diagnose the entire modern world.
And they start with this concept of the Kali Yuga. So let's unpack this for someone who has maybe never studied Hindu philosophy. What exactly is a yuga?
Well, in Vedic philosophy, time isn't a straight line progressing from, primitive to advanced, which is how we generally view it in the West.
Right, the linear timeline.
Exactly. Instead, time is cyclical. It moves through 4 great ages, or yugas, much like the seasons of a year. And the sources argue that humanity is currently deep into the Kali Yuga. This is the 4th and final age of the cycle.
And it's not exactly the fun age, is it?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It is fundamentally characterized by darkness, spiritual confusion, global conflict, and a really profound descent into materialism. It's basically the age where the spiritual gives way entirely to the physical.
And the texts describe this incredibly intense paradox of modern civilization. I mean, think about it. On one hand, we possess unprecedented technological power. We have external comforts and digital conveniences that ancient emperors couldn't have even imagined.
Oh yeah, air conditioning, smartphones, global travel.
All of it. But on the other hand, look at the internal state of humanity. Millions of people feel spiritually exhausted, deeply anxious, chronically depressed, and just fundamentally lonely.
And the sources explain this paradox through a foundational concept called Maya, which translates broadly to illusion. Now, it's really crucial to understand that Maya isn't a cheap magic trick. It doesn't mean the chair you're sitting on literally doesn't exist.
Right, it's not like the Matrix where nothing is real physically.
Exactly. Maya is more about the spiritual ignorance that masks our divine interconnected core. The texts argue that in the Kali Yuga, humanity becomes completely hypnotized by the external material reality.
We start believing that we are our bank accounts, basically.
Yes, our bank accounts, our job titles, our physical bodies, our social media profiles, we are just endlessly distracted by screens, entertainment, and the insatiable demands of the ego.
You know, I was trying to visualize this when reading the sources, and the best analogy I could come up with is comparing the modern human mind to a smartphone.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, imagine a phone running 100 complex, high-bandwidth apps simultaneously in the background. The battery is just constantly aggressively draining. But because we're utterly terrified of the silence that's required to actually plug the phone in, put it down, and let it recharge.
We just keep frantically opening more apps.
Exactly. We use it to distract ourselves from the low battery warning, so the whole operating system is perpetually on the verge of crashing.
I would actually push that analogy even further, It's not just that the battery is draining. The texts imply that the operating system of the modern world is actively designed to make you fear the charger.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Silence, introspection, spiritual stillness, those are threats to an economy based on constant consumption. And this brings in the connection to Carl Jung, which the sources mention. Jung spoke extensively about the collective unconscious and the shadow.
Let's explore that yin-yang connection for a second. How does the shadow relate to this idea of Maya and the Kali Yuga?
So, Jung's concept of the shadow represents the repressed, unacknowledged parts of the human psyche. The sources suggest that in the Kali Yuga, society has completely repressed its spiritual interconnected nature. We've pushed our need for cosmic meaning into the shadow.
And what happens to repressed psychological material? It projects outward, right?
Exactly. It manifests as this desperate, obsessive need to control the physical world. We build massive technological empires and bureaucratic systems to try and fill an internal void that just cannot be filled with external things.
Because we identify solely with our fleeting thoughts and external achievements, we've completely lost the inner awareness needed to maintain what the texts call Raita.
Raita, yes. That's a huge concept here.
Let's define that, because it really seems to be the linchpin of the whole argument in these documents.
Raita is the cosmic order. It's the fundamental underlying balance of the universe. It governs everything, from the physical movement of the planets to the moral and ethical conduct of human beings.
It's like the rhythm of existence.
Precisely. And when humanity loses its inner awareness, when we're trapped in Maya, we fall out of alignment with Raita. The sources point to the hyper-individualism and rampant consumerism of the West as prime examples of this disconnect.
Right. We treat the external world, including the environment and other living beings, merely as resources to be consumed.
Yes, and the texts explicitly connect this spiritual decline to a tangible vulnerability. Without that inner anchor, we become a really fragile society. We are highly intelligent, sure. We have the capacity to split the atom or edit genes.
But we completely lack the underlying wisdom to manage that power responsibly.
Exactly. And this spiritual forgetting is not viewed as some tragic accident in these texts. It is a predicted cyclical phase of human evolution. The ancient sages understood that external technological power would eventually outpace psychological and spiritual wisdom.
Because technology expands exponentially, right? But human consciousness becomes consumed and kind of fractured by distraction.
Right. And this extreme imbalance inevitably paves the way for systemic collapse. A civilization built purely on external stimulation and material control has absolutely no structural foundation when that external world begins to falter.
Which brings us to a really fascinating historical document highlighted in the sources. To track this decline of civilization, the texts reference an ancient Indian manual referred to as 40 Ways to Steal.
Yes.
And they claim this document beat modern forensic accounting by 2,000 years.
It's an incredible text. It's a reference to the Arthashastra, which is an ancient Indian treatise on statecraft, economic policy, and military strategy, authored by Chanakya.
Okay, so very ancient political text.
Right, and the section detailing the 40 ways to steal is deeply significant to the overarching narrative here. It is not just the dry ledger of financial crimes, it's a profound psychological observation of human nature operating under the influence of Maya.
Let's get specific then. What kind of stealing are we talking about? Because a 2,000-year-old accounting manual sounds incredibly dry, but the text frames it as a core piece of this whole cosmic puzzle.
The manual details incredibly specific methods of embezzlement and corruption within a bureaucracy. It describes how officials might falsify dates on ledgers, how they might skim state revenue by tampering with weights and measures.
Oh, wow. So very practical.
Very practical. It talks about how they might intentionally misclassify goods to pay lower taxes, or how they might collude with auditors. Chanakya famously wrote that just as it is impossible not to taste the honey that finds itself at the tip of the tongue, it is impossible for a government official not to eat up at least a bit of the king's revenue.
That's a great quote. So it's essentially recognizing that when a system grows large and bureaucratic, human beings driven by their ego and material desires will inevitably corrupt it.
Right.
But the source texts are doing more than just giving a history lesson on ancient fraud, right? They're tying this back to the cosmic order.
Exactly. The texts use this ancient manual to illustrate that wrongdoing, corruption, and inflicting pain on others for personal gain are not merely legal or administrative issues, they are cosmic issues.
Because of karma.
Yes. Every time a bureaucrat skimmed off the top, every time an official falsified a record that caused a poor farmer to starve, they were accumulating bad karma. And this internal spiritual disconnect, the Kali Yuga mentality, it doesn't just stay inside a single corrupt person's head.
It scales up.
It scales up massively. It dictates the behavior of massive institutions, governments, and entire empires. It creates real, tangible, crushing karmic debt. It leads to the decline of civilization itself.
And this is where the metaphysical lens focuses directly and somewhat uncomfortably on human history. The sources bring in the framework of Dr. David R. Hawkins, specifically his work distinguishing between force and true power. Now, for the listener who hasn't encountered Hawkins, we probably need to explain how he arrived at these concepts. He proposed a map or a scale of human consciousness where different emotions, motivations, and states of being calibrate at different numerical levels.
Yeah, and we should note that Hawkins' methodology is controversial in mainstream science. It relies heavily on a concept called applied kinesiology, or muscle testing, which he believed could bypass the conscious mind to access absolute truth.
Right. But setting the methodology aside for a moment, the philosophical framework he built is what the sources are utilizing here.
Exactly. The scale is logarithmic, and it runs from 1 to 1,000. At the lowest end, you have states like shame, guilt, and apathy, which calibrate around 20 to 50. In the middle, around 200, you have courage, which is the tipping point from negative to positive.
And the text gives a very specific, historically charged example to illustrate this scale in action. It examines the British Empire's colonialism in India.
A prime example of what they're talking about.
Yeah. According to Hawkins' scale, the British Empire, during its colonial expansion, calibrated at a level of 175. That specific numerical level represents pride, self-interest, exploitation.
And crucially, it represents the absolute peak of what Hawkins calls force.
Right. Contrast that level of 175 with Mahatma Gandhi. Hawkins calibrated Gandhi at an astonishing 700. On this logarithmic scale, 700 is near the very top of normal human consciousness.
It's essentially the realm of enlightenment. That level represents true power.
So the core argument the sources are extracting from Hawkins is that when force, no matter how heavily armed or financially backed it is, meets true power, force is eventually and inevitably defeated.
Let's dissect why that is, because it's kind of counterintuitive. Right?
Yeah. I mean, if you have an empire with dreadnoughts, gunpowder, and a global banking system, how is that not ultimate power?
Because force, according to this framework, is ultimately out of alignment with Radha. It's out of alignment with the cosmic balance.
Yeah.
Force is inherently fragile because it requires a constant massive influx of energy to sustain itself.
It has to keep pushing.
Exactly. It relies entirely on coercion, on punitive laws, on warfare, on complex market manipulation, and on the suppression of others. It has no internal anchor, whereas true power, calibrating at 700, requires absolutely no defense.
Yeah.
It exists in alignment with truth and cosmic order. It's self-sustaining.
And this ties directly back to the cosmic ledger we discussed with the 40 ways to steal. The law of karma is simply the universal law of cause and effect. The texts argue that, historically, nations like the British Empire gathered immense negative karma by entering other countries, killing indigenous populations, and conquering the free will of people.
And hoarding wealth, don't forget that. These actions are pure force. They throw the entire universe out of balance.
But I have to step in and push back a little here just to play devil's advocate. It's very easy to look back at history, point to a conquering colonial empire and say, well, yes, obviously that was force, that was blatant exploitation. But how does this philosophy apply to our modern world? We aren't dealing with the East India Company anymore. How does this concept of karmic debt apply to modern institutions that are explicitly designed, funded, and staffed to help people? I mean, we're talking about modern healthcare systems, hospitals, medical charities.
And that pushback leads directly into what is arguably the most provocative and honestly unsettling argument made in these source materials.
Yeah, it really flips the script.
It does. They argue that historical empires operated under a fallacy of invisibility. They believed they could use force without facing cosmic consequences. Today, the sources claim, modern force hasn't disappeared. It simply wears a different mask.
It wears the mask of extreme benevolence.
Precisely. It's the charity trap. The sources deliver a really heavy critique of the concept of the charity trap. They argue that massive centralized state health systems like the NHS in the UK or massive global health initiatives driven by billionaire philanthropists often end up fostering deep systemic dependency rather than genuine human empowerment.
Let me make sure I fully understand the argument here. Are the sources saying that a modern hospital system is structurally similar to a colonial empire?
In terms of the suppression of human free will, yes. That is exactly what they're arguing.
Wow.
Instead of a colonial army enforcing laws with muskets, you have a massive bureaucracy enforcing protocols with forms, wait times, and a monopoly on knowledge. The result, the conquering of individual agency, is structurally identical. The individual is trained to believe they are powerless without the institution.
I mean, think about the last time you, the listener, sat in a hospital waiting room or tried to navigate a complex medical billing issue. Did you feel like a complex, unique human being, or did you feel like a barcode waiting to be scanned?
Right. And the texts introduce this chilling term to describe this phenomenon: statistical morality.
Statistical morality. Let's dig into that.
Statistical morality is the argument that a massive medical monopoly inherently strips away human dignity. In order for a massive bureaucracy to function, it literally cannot process human complexity. It has to reduce you to data.
You cease to be a unique individual with a personal history, a family context, and a highly specific biological ecosystem. Instead, you're reduced to a body mass index. You are bed number 42. You're an actuarial risk factor.
You are a demographic data point on a spreadsheet.
Or, if we look at it from a purely cynical economic perspective, you are a profit source. The sources claim this statistical morality creates a cycle of fear-based healthcare. You are subtly taught by the system that your body is a ticking time bomb, you know?
Yeah, like a fragile machine that's constantly breaking down.
Exactly. And that only the institution possesses the sacred knowledge required to diffuse it. You become completely alienated from your own biology.
To ground this profound, abstract philosophical critique in gritty reality, the sources detail the personal professional timeline of Dr. Katyali Srivatsa. His journey serves as the narrative spine that holds all these massive concepts together.
His story really kicks off with a profound and heartbreaking tragedy. The texts detail a specific terrible day in December 1989. Dr. Srivatsa was working in an accident and emergency department. A 14-year-old boy, who was otherwise completely healthy, walked into the hospital. And through a cascade of systemic failures, that young boy died that very evening, literally holding Dr. Srivatsa's hand.
It's horrific. And that singular event catalyzed everything that followed. It utterly shattered the illusion of the infallible medical machine for him. It brutally highlighted the deadly gap between treating a localized symptom based on a statistical protocol and actually understanding the holistic reality of a patient.
And this realization culminated in a piece he published in the British Medical Journal in 1996, where he stated an incredibly simple but radical idea. He wrote, "The duty of a doctor is to listen to the story of a person."
Not just to look at the chart.
Right. Not just to issue a prescription to clear the waiting room, but to listen to the lived experience.
But the institution did not want to listen to stories. The sources document his grueling journey as a whistleblower against the National Health Service. And this ties right back to the idea of institutional karma and force.
Because when he exposed wrongdoings, when he pointed out that the system's rigidity was actually inflicting pain and suffering and causing avoidable deaths, the bureaucracy didn't thank him for improving the system.
Far from it. The tribunal documents and records detailed in the sources show a distinct pattern of severe punitive sanctions against him.
Let's look at the mechanics of that pushback. When an individual challenges a massive institution, the institution doesn't engage in philosophical debate. It uses the bureaucratic equivalent of brute force.
Yeah, the texts argue that institutions are almost biologically programmed to prioritize their own survival, their annual budgets, and their public reputations far above individual patient lives or, the careers of dissenting doctors.
So what does that pushback actually look like in practice?
It looks like weaponized human resources procedures. It looks like gag orders. It looks like professional isolation, character assassination, and endless tribunal hearings designed to exhaust the whistleblower emotionally and financially.
They actively punish those who expose their moral bankruptcy.
Exactly. They use the force of their bureaucracy to crush dissent, believing, again, in that ancient fallacy of invisibility. They assume that because they are following procedural rules, the cosmic ledger isn't recording the profound karmic debt of destroying a truth teller.
So what does this all mean for the patient trapped inside this system? The sources argue it creates a massive economic ecosystem built entirely on dependency. They make this brutal, undeniable economic point. If a healthcare system truly cures a patient, if it addresses the root cause and restores them to total health, it loses a customer.
It's a dark way to look at it, but economically it's true.
Right. But if it merely manages your symptoms with a daily pill, it secures a lifelong stream of revenue. This completely undermines human free will. You become a permanent dependent on the very system that is subtly motivated to keep you just sick enough to need them.
It is a profound modern manipulation of Maya. The illusion is that you are being cared for, that the system is a benevolent shield protecting you from disease. But in reality, your agency, your wealth, and your bodily autonomy are being steadily extracted.
But, I have to ask the obvious practical question here. If the very system we rely on for our physical survival is fundamentally designed to keep us dependent, how do we break this cycle?
Right.
We cannot just abandon the undeniable life-saving benefits of modern medical science, right? If I get hit by a car, I want an emergency room, I don't want a philosophical debate about karma. We can't just stop taking medicine.
The sources are very clear that they do not advocate for abandoning science or emergency medicine. But they argue that the consequence of this massive institutional hubris, this complete reliance on force and external intervention to solve every minor biological problem, isn't just a matter of bad public policy or wasted tax dollars.
It's much bigger than that.
The universe itself, the underlying biological reality of nature, is actively reacting to this massive karmic imbalance. And it's reacting through the microscopic world. Nature is acting.
Which brings us to the terrifying reality of the superbug crisis. Antimicrobial resistance, or AMR.
Yes. The texts frame AMR not just as a tricky medical emergency that requires a new drug, but as an existential global threat driven by cosmic blowback. The statistics they cite are staggering. They project that superbugs could kill 10 million people annually by the year 2050.
10 million people a year. That is a completely incomprehensible number. How did we get to the point where the microscopic world is threatening to wipe us out on that scale?
Well, the sources point straight back to that concept of force.
Because we discovered antibiotics, which the texts brilliantly refer to as the gunpowder of modern medicine, and we use them with breathtaking recklessness.
Think about the history of antibiotics. It is the ultimate story of hubris. We didn't just use them to save lives in critical situations. We used them to fatten millions of chickens and cows to increase agricultural profit margins.
Which is insane.
We sold them over the counter without prescriptions in many parts of the developing world, allowing people to take them like candy for a minor cough. And even within advanced, highly regulated healthcare systems, they were handed out as administrative quick fixes.
Right. If you have an exhausted doctor with a waiting room full of 50 angry, frightened patients, it's incredibly fast to just write a prescription for a broad-spectrum antibiotic. It takes 5 minutes.
Instead of taking 30 minutes to properly consult with that patient, explain that they likely have a viral cold, and convince them that an antibiotic won't help.
The system's demand for speed created the crisis. We treated the invisible, microscopic world as an absolute adversary. It was something to be conquered, dominated, and entirely eradicated using chemical force.
It's like we discovered a fly in our house, and instead of opening a window, we decided to use a sledgehammer to kill it.
That's a great analogy.
We just kept swinging the sledgehammer, smashing the walls, destroying our own foundation, and instead of solving the problem, the flies didn't die. They mutated. Now they eat the sledgehammer.
Wow.
We are facing a microscopic enemy that literally learns from our weapons and exploits our genetic vulnerabilities.
That sledgehammer analogy is perfect because it highlights the collateral damage. The texts argue that by over-relying on these aggressive chemical sledgehammers, we completely ruined our own internal biological ecology.
Yes, we decimated our gut flora. The sources note that the human microbiome is intrinsically tied to our innate immunity. By trying to sterilize our bodies with force, we suppressed the body's natural, ancient ability to heal itself. We destroyed the invisible world within us.
And because our modern healthcare systems are built entirely on that exact same concept of force-rigid bureaucracy, delayed care, massive, centralized, crowded waiting rooms, they are uniquely vulnerable to this specific microscopic reaction.
Oh, entirely vulnerable.
If you think about it, a centralized, slow-moving hospital is the absolute worst place to fight a rapidly mutating, highly contagious superbug. You are bringing all the sick, vulnerable people into one room and letting the superbug jump between them.
The nations that gathered negative karma by conquering the free will of others and hoarding wealth are now self-destructing from within because their rigid systems cannot adapt to a fluid, evolving threat. Nature is acting to restore balance.
So let's take stock of where we are. We have a massive karmic debt. We have a global healthcare system trapped in statistical morality and the charity trap. And we have an incoming apocalyptic wave of superbugs that easily outsmart our best chemical weapons.
It sounds bleak.
Very bleak. To fight an enemy that bypasses modern medical bureaucracy, Dr. Srivatsa didn't look to Silicon Valley for a solution. He didn't look for a new chemical sledgehammer. He looked backward. He looked to a 600-year-old operating system.
This is where the synthesis of the source material becomes truly extraordinary. The texts reveal Dr. Srivatsa's deep, ancestral spiritual heritage. He isn't just a disgruntled medical doctor. He belongs to the Katyali Upadhyaya Brahmin lineage, specifically the Vishwamitra Gotra.
Let's break those terms down for the listeners. What does it mean to be part of the Vishwamitra Gotra?
A Gotra is a lineage system in Hindu society, tracing a family's descent back to an ancient sage, or Rishi. Vishwamitra is one of the most venerated sages in ancient India, often associated with profound transformation and the discovery of powerful spiritual mantras.
Okay, so it's a very prominent lineage.
Very prominent. Being part of this lineage carries a heavy historical expectation of scholarly pursuit and spiritual duty.
And this specific family lineage has a documented, unbroken connection stretching back over 600 years to the Uluru Kartikeya temple.
Yes, and the symbolism embedded in that connection is impossible to ignore. In Hindu theology, Kartikeya is not a god of peace.
Right.
He is the divine physician and the commander of the celestial armies. He is specifically known and worshipped as a demon slayer. He is depicted carrying a divine spear, known as the Vel, which is used to pierce spiritual ignorance and destroy disease.
So we literally have the descendant of the ancient priests who served the divine demon slayer, and he is now using technology to fight the modern demons of microscopic superbugs. You honestly could not write a more cinematic narrative.
It's wild, isn't it? But the sources make it clear that this is more than just a convenient narrative parallel. It's about the practical execution of a specific spiritual concept called lokasamgraha.
Let's explore lokasamgraha. What does that require of a person?
Lokasamgraha translates roughly to the welfare, preservation, and holding together of the world. It is a central driving concept in the Bhagavad Gita. It requires an individual to take selfless action for the greater good of society, completely detached from personal gain or ego.
So if we go back to Dr. Hawkins' scale, lokasamgraha is the exact opposite of the force, pride, and self-interest that calibrates at level 175.
Precisely. It is acting in total alignment with Raita, the cosmic order. It is true power.
And the sources detail how Srivatsa's ancestors practically applied this concept of holding the world together. They served as scholarly advisors, holding the title of Astama Vidwans at the Sringeri Matha.
And for context, the Sringeri Matha is one of the most important centers of Hindu theology, established in the 8th century to protect and propagate spiritual knowledge. His ancestors were literal guardians of wisdom.
And today, Dr. Srivatsa is translating that exact hereditary dharmic duty into measurable digital data. The sources make it emphatically clear. The AI health system he built is not a Silicon Valley tech startup desperately aiming for a billion-dollar IPO.
No, not at all.
It is the modern manifestation of a sacred duty to protect humanity from self-destruction. What I found fascinating was the historical parallel the texts draw regarding funding.
Oh, the temple grants.
Yes. In ancient times, kings and rulers would give temple grants, tracts of land or resources to support the scholarly priests so they could focus entirely on protecting the community spiritually without worrying about survival. The sources refer to Srivatsa's modern digital health tools as a contemporary technological grant to humanity.
It represents a profound conceptual shift in how we view technology. He's taking the ancient localized duty of preserving a single community's well-being and operationalizing it through globally scalable software.
He's building a system explicitly designed to dismantle the charity trap.
Exactly. To break the dependency on the medical monopoly and give the controller back to the player.
Which brings us to the physical manifestation of Lokasamgraha in the 21st century, the architecture of Dr. Maya AI and the Prima kiosk.
Let's break down how this technology actually works, because the architecture really reflects the philosophy. The system is split into two distinct but deeply integrated halves. First, there is Dr. Maya AI, which the texts poetically refer to as the reasoning soul of the system.
I love that phrase.
And then there's the Prima kiosk, which serves as the physical, accessible community front end.
The texts emphasize that Dr. Maya is not just another basic algorithmic symptom checker. I mean, we've all used those websites where you input a headache and it runs you through this rigid yes or no decision tree, and 10 clicks later it tells you that you might have a rare brain parasite.
Which just causes more fear.
Right. Dr. Maya is different. It goes back to Srivatsa's 1996 BMJ article. It is designed to listen to the user's story. It combines complex AI pattern recognition, utilizing natural language processing, with localized cultural context and intuitive human understanding.
And the Prima kiosk ensures that this powerful AI isn't just an app locked behind a paywall for the wealthy or the highly tech-savvy in urban centers.
That's key.
The physical kiosk is designed to be placed directly into the flow of daily life. In rural villages, local pharmacies, schools, bus stations, it speaks the user's local dialect.
So it allows someone who is sick, frightened, and confused to approach it, tell their story in their own words, receive a guided, intelligent self-assessment, and understand their true biological risk level before they ever step foot in a crowded, dangerous hospital waiting room.
And it achieves this clarity by breaking down dense, exclusionary medical jargon into a universal visual language that anyone, regardless of education level, can instantly understand. It uses the color-coded safety language triad.
This color coding is the operational core of the system's ability to dismantle dependency. It uses 4 distinct colors. Red is straightforward, right? It indicates serious, immediate medical danger.
Right, if the kiosk gives you a red signal, you need to seek an emergency doctor or hospital immediately. The system recognizes that emergency medicine is necessary and directs you to it efficiently.
Then there is blue. And from reading through the mechanics of the system in the sources, the blue signal seems to be the absolute monumental game changer when it comes to fighting the superbug crisis. Wait, let me make sure I fully grasp this. If I go to the kiosk and get a blue signal, it isn't necessarily telling me that I am personally in critical danger, right? It's telling me that I am a risk to others.
Exactly. You've hit on the genius of the system. Blue signals a high risk of communicable infection. It tells the user to isolate immediately to protect their family, their elderly neighbors, and their broader community.
Oh.
Even if your symptoms feel relatively mild to you, maybe just a cough and a slight fever, a blue signal fundamentally shifts the burden of care. It tells you that you are a biological danger to others.
That completely rewires how we think about sickness. Usually it's all about how do I feel.
Exactly. It moves from individual panic to community protection.
Then you have the green signal, which represents a moderate concern. The system advises you to monitor symptoms and perhaps consult a nurse or doctor in a few days if it doesn't improve. And finally, the yellow signal, which indicates a minor or self-limiting issue.
A yellow signal empowers you to go to the local chemist, get some over-the-counter relief, and practice safe self-care at home.
Now, if we connect this highly specific technological solution back to the massive systemic issues we discussed earlier, you can instantly see how this dismantles the medical monopoly and fights AMR. Let's imagine a mother in a rural village whose child wakes up with a fever.
Okay.
In the old system, the system of dependency, statistical morality, and fear, she might panic. She might travel for 3 hours on a bus to reach a centralized clinic. She sits in a crowded waiting room for 4 hours surrounded by other contagious people. When she finally sees an exhausted doctor, she demands an antibiotic because she needs to feel like the agonizing journey was worth it.
And the doctor, who has 3 minutes per patient, gives her the antibiotic just to clear the room. The superbug mutates a little bit more. The cycle of AMR continues unabated.
Precisely. But introduce the Prima kiosk into that scenario. The mother walks to the center of her own village. She interacts with the kiosk in her own language. She tells the AI the child's story. The system analyzes the data and recognizes a yellow pattern.
It immediately calms her fear. It gives her back her agency. It explains how to manage the viral fever safely at home with rest and hydration without resorting to unnecessary chemical force.
Or, conversely, the AI recognizes a blue pattern. It tells her the child is highly contagious with a severe pathogen. By instructing her to isolate the child at home, the system keeps that child out of the hospital waiting room. It drastically reduces the vector of cross-infections. It stops the contagious from infecting the vulnerable.
And crucially, it protects the medical professionals. By successfully filtering out the millions of panic-driven yellow and green cases, the system ensures that the highly trained doctors and nurses actually have the time, energy, and resources to focus intensely on the red cases, the people who truly need complex, specialized, life-saving care.
It restores balance to the entire medical ecosystem. It brings RADA back to healthcare.
And I was really struck by an incredible observation in the source text about how this data scales up geographically. The Dr. Maya system doesn't just treat individual patients in isolation. It functions as a highly sensitive, real-time societal seismograph.
Oh, the early warning radar?
Yes. Imagine thousands of these kiosks distributed across an entire region or country. If 30 kiosks in one specific neighborhood suddenly flag blue on a Tuesday morning, the system instantly provides an early warning radar for public health officials.
They can identify a localized outbreak of a new mutating superbug days or even weeks before the local hospital emergency room is ever overwhelmed.
It is the ultimate modernized expression of locus graha, holding the world together. It is utilizing massive data sets and artificial intelligence not to control populations, not to sell them more pills, and not to profit from their fear, but to protect the collective whole.
It is actively paying off the karmic debt generated by the charity trap.
Yes, by democratizing ancient wisdom and modern medical clarity, it looks the patient in the eye and says, "You are not a statistic, you are not a bed number, you have agency. Here's the exact knowledge you need to protect yourself and your community."
It is an absolutely incredible synthesis of ideas. We started this journey looking at the cosmic imbalance of the Kali Yuga, exploring how human ego and Maya lead to massive institutions that use force and fear to build monopolies, accumulating crushing negative karma over centuries.
We looked at how the destruction of the microscopic world through our reckless use of antibiotics was a profound violation of natural law.
And we end with Dr. Srivatsa using the spiritual, scholarly blueprint of his ancestors to build the Dr. Maya ecosystem, making a desperate but brilliant attempt to restore balance and human free will in the face of an apocalyptic microbial threat.
The overarching lesson of all these sources is that the universe ultimately demands balance. Force always eventually collapses under its own weight. The superbug crisis is simply nature's brutal biological reaction to our arrogance.
Dr. Maya represents an attempt to align the pinnacle of modern technology with the deepest roots of ancient wisdom in order to survive that reaction. Which brings it all back to you, the listener. The texts argue that the power of true healing does not start in a laboratory or a hospital waiting room.
No, it starts with inner awareness.
It starts with actively rejecting the illusion of dependency. You have to recognize and step out of the charity trap in your own life.
Because true power, as Hawkins defined it, and as Loka Sangraha demands it, is never coercive. It is only ever empowering.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over, building on everything we've explored today. If our societal obsession with external technological progress has masked a deep internal spiritual decline, what other massive systems in your daily life are secretly operating on force rather than true power?
What institutions, whether in education, finance, or government, are quietly fostering your dependency while loudly claiming to save you?
And what would happen if you applied the clarifying, color-coded honesty of Dr. Maya to your own psychological dependencies? Where are the red, blue, green, and yellow alerts flashing in your own mind? Because until you can read your own internal signals, you will always be relying on someone else's broken X-ray machine.